Welcome to the webinar on using strategic consultations to advance graduate education on your campus, which is featuring speakers Kevin Archer, Thomas Naehr, and Robert Augustine. Before we get started with the presentations, I just want to go over a few logistical things. So there'll be 3 presentations today. Each presentation will be between 10 and 12 minutes. There will be a question and answer session following all 3 of the presentations. The webinar recording, as well as the slides, will be emailed to participants in today's webinar and will also be posted on the CGS website as a member benefit. After the presentations, or even during the presentations, you can submit questions through the GoToWebinar control panel as shown in the graphic on the slide. If you're having technical problems, either problems with audio or connectivity issues, you can copy-paste the URL below into your web browser, and GoToWebinar should be able to assist you. One common issue that people have problems with is audio, and there's 2 kind of common ways of dealing with that problem. The first is by switching different audio connections. So if you're using a telephone connection, switching to the microphone and speakers, or vice versa. And you can do this all without leaving the session, so you won't miss any content. If you're already on your telephone and you're having trouble with the telephone connection, you can try an alternate phone number by looking at the panel graphic to your right. Okay, so let's get started. With the first presenter is going to be Kevin Archer, who's Dean of the School of Graduate Studies and Research at Central Washington University. Welcome, Dean Archer.
Welcome, everyone, from Ellensburg, Washington, just east of the Cascade Mountains from the Seattle area in the agricultural center of the state. Slide. Okay, I'm going to dwell on this slide for a little bit because it's probably the only slide I have with an interesting graphic. That's our campus. But I also wanted to put into context this whole conversation about graduate studies at Central, the context of a state in which they've been divesting of public higher education for the last decade or so, and some of this is going to resonate with the audience. So, but I just wanted to make some context. And so we've gone from a state-supported institution with a budget of about 75% coming from the state and the rest funded by tuition to just the opposite. So we're basically about 25 to 30% funded by the state and otherwise funded by tuition, which means a mad dash for tuition dollars. And it's a situation where we basically privatized the institution, and we don't have an endowment for the obvious reason that was just in the Chronicle of Higher Education, that we never gave much thought to fundraising with state support as it was. So the final part of this context is we're an institution like many of yours that is moving to the so-called RCM ABB model of budgeting, which leads to a lot of competition amongst colleges for tuition dollars and a lot of playing around with the general education requirements and who's in it and who's not and things like that. The other part of the context is that the regional comprehensives are sort of lost in the shuffle. There's a Western Washington, there's an Eastern Washington, and here we are in Central Washington. Basically, politicians are clamoring for community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees. They now are called Bachelor's of Applied Science, but that's not where they're going to stop, I'm sure. There's even talk of creating Masters of Applied Sciences to be given by community colleges, which is ludicrous, but I won't editorialize too much. But what that means is labeling Central Washington as a predominantly or thoroughly undergraduate institution is not going to cut it much anymore, because basically you can stay at Bellevue or on the other side of the mountains and go to one of these community colleges and get your bachelor's degree. So what I have argued in my 4.5-year term as dean here, as new to the institution, is that graduate studies is basically the only thing that distinguishes us between us and the community colleges. We do research here. Research is ultimately tied to good teaching. It's a misnomer, a misconception to say that they're somehow separated. And we pay close attention to our students at the master's level particularly. And it's a great place to start your graduate degree. At the same time, community colleges are offering four-year degrees, basically. The Research One institutions, Washington and Washington States, are creating branch campuses, undergraduate branch campuses. University of Washington to the south in Tacoma, and to the north in Bothell of the Seattle area, and Washington State actually creating a branch campus less than 200 miles away in eastern Washington, 200 miles away from us in the Tri-City area. Basically, it's going to be a 10,000 student institution, residential undergraduate. So again, what is the role of Central? Well, the only thing that distinguishes it as these things come to pass is that we do have graduate studies, we have graduate students, and we are actively researching. So that's the context. It's not a pretty picture because if we're talking about a privatized institution, graduate studies is generally not a money maker anywhere, and particularly not if we're going to have competition for students of the R1s and so on. Slide. Okay, so a little bit about us. So we're moving in the 40s from a college situation to a university situation. It started out as a normal school, so ultimately the first graduate programs were education. We now have a current enrollment in the 500s. We have about 700 graduate students on the books. The current total enrollment is 1,200. They want to grow that, of course. They're not paying much attention to the graduate side of the house on that either, and that's going to be a running sort of narrative in my presentation. We are continually by the executive characterized as an undergraduate institution, and I keep jumping up and down and saying, well, no, we do have graduate programs. Slide. So we have about 30 master's programs, one educational specialist degree, mostly applied professional degrees. We do have traditional STEM programs, a large psychology program, a prominent music graduate degree. Music is one of our signature programs, as is theater. We have 4 colleges with graduate degrees, although College of Business just disorganized their Master of Accounting from retirements and lack of resources to populate it again, and also because to get a CPA you don't really need a master's degree, you just need a certain number of post-baccalaureate credits, and that's why I've introduced them to graduate certificates, so they're likely to come online again soon. Slide. So why review graduate programming? Well, when I took the position 4.5 years ago and looked over the terrain, I've wanted to do a review of graduate programming. I've been wanting to do it both because I wanted to get it into the narrative of Central, of the president and the provost. The new provost, so we have low and stagnant enrollment in several programs, not unusual. Some argue that they can't handle anymore given their time in undergraduate teaching. That's to be seen. I've offered ideas of, creative ways to deliver programs and so on. And then we had a new provost that came on board last year, and she decided that we had too many programs. I'm not sure where that came from, but she decided that, and so it wasn't really a convincing on my part to engage the Council of Graduate Schools. It was my idea to the new provost, and we ran with it, of course, as long as I funded it from my budget. Sorry, joke. So the whole assessment was to be sort of treated like a usual academic program assessment, only we're going to look at all of graduate programming at CWU, and that's what we'll get at later. Slide. So we focused on three very broad areas, and I came up with this in consultation with the Associate Provost for Assessment and Accreditation to get a sense of the general context, the general nature of graduate studies. So assessment of graduate programs and demand, what are really programs that we should be concentrating on? Is there a demand for those? Student funding, our graduate stipends are pathetically low, and I've been trying to get them raised, but have been to no avail. Having 3 bosses in 4 years is a little difficult to get continuity, and I keep saying the same thing. And then the organization and administrative structure of the School of Graduate Studies and Research. So we're a combined unit with research. I made sure that continued. I think that gives us a critical mass. So I have a director of research under me, and as well as graduate studies. Slide. So I think I want to pause on this slide too a bit. I don't want to go over time, but this is very important for those of you thinking about having consultants visit. The more you can provide them beforehand, the better they hit the ground running. I had done several reports justifying the existence because, in parentheses here, my office was actually on the chopping block of budget cuts to distribute graduate studies to the different colleges when I actually took this position. And so I have been doing a lot of missionary work and a lot of cajoling and arguing. And so I had I had a few pretty extensive reports that I sent their way, gave them a sense of what it is we would like them to focus in on, how they could help us, and so forth. So I would say for those of you thinking about consultations, this is a very important part of it. Slide. So the on-site review process, which is what I was supposed to talk about today, we had consultants from similar-sized institutions with similar problems. It was a 2-day agenda, much like an executive candidate visit. They were occupied all the time with meeting various peoples and groups around the campus. Slide. So we met with president, provost, deans, and the rest. And I would emphasize on this side the quality time. The dinners that I had and my staff had with them were just, they were great. It was great to have someone there encouraging, have advice and so forth. And even the transport to the airport, since we're on this side of the mountains, the airport's on the other side of the mountains. I was with them, of course it snowed. I was with them over the pass and got every bit of advice I could from them before they go. And so quality time, if you can organize it and put key people there, presidents, provosts, I couldn't do that, but that would be a good time because it was really a choice opportunity to get questions answered that weren't answered in the more formal meetings. Slide. Okay, strategic find. Okay, so here are some of the strategic findings. As I said, I have very boring slides. They're mostly text, but basically, they gave me a lot of insight on how to approach this new budget model, how basically to enhance programs and sunset those that have, probably won't have a chance, which is already a difficult conversation, but one that needs to happen. One finding that I found genuinely important was that our research side of the house was understaffed, underfinanced. The way I would put that is that you have to invest money to make money. And so the idea was if you continue to fund your internal grants with only the indirects you're getting from grants already procured, then you're always going to be in this spiral, not a spiral, but you're in a holding pattern. You're not moving forward. Advice on how to raise graduate assistantships, how to make arguments for that, and so on. Slide. So branding, I think we go back. So branding is an important part, and they will give me insight. So I've been arguing for 4 years that we can't be a vanilla graduate school. We need to have signature programs, and that's a difficult conversation to have in a sedimented institution like this with a culture that it's always been the same way, and why change it? I've been arguing you have to change it into, so the argument there is if you brand some as signature, then the other programs don't like it, and so on and so forth. Those are tough conversations that are going to have to be made, or going to have to be had anyway. So having consultants argue along those lines helps me make that argument here. And understaffing in general in the School of Graduate Studies was an eye-opener for me, because I was actually afraid that they'd say we were overstaffed. But I learned a lot. I wasn't born to be a graduate dean, so it's important to talk to other graduate deans and get their insight, particularly ones seasoned like the consultants. Slide. Benefits of the process. I could pause here with this slide, because really just having the consultants on campus, meeting with particularly the president and provost, but other administrators, faculty, graduate students, was significant because it actually raised the profile of graduate studies. In fact, really, you have graduate studies here? I know it's not that bad, but really having them here was very important part of the process, and talking to people and talking to people from the graduate studies point of view. Slide. So what have we done with the results? Well, basically the overall answer to that is the results, and I can't go into detail of all the results, but it's really driving the conversation, and it will drive the conversation about graduate studies for the next few years. The first thing is that we've developed a process and instruments over last year for a full-scale assessment of all graduate programs to please the provost. And so this year we're actually going to institute that, and a lot of the ideas for what kind of templates to use for graduate program assessment, what is important in graduate program assessment, were advised by the consultants and of course by the many materials that we can get from the Council of Graduate Schools. And no, it's not a pitch for the Council of Graduate Schools. I'm just saying, from my point of view, it transformed me from a lonely voice in the wilderness to somewhere at the table. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Dean Archer. So up next, we have Thomas Naehr, who is the Dean of the Graduate School at the University of the Pacific. Welcome, Dean Naehr.
Thanks, Matt, and hello to everybody from sunny Stockton. As Matt said, I'm the Graduate Dean at the University of the Pacific. We are a private institution, a comprehensive liberal arts institution. We were founded in 1851, which makes us the oldest chartered institution of higher education in California. We're fairly small in size, with a total enrollment this fall of about 6,500 students. 1,170 or so are graduate students. In addition, we have about 1,600 professional students in our schools of pharmacy, law, and dentistry. We're classified as a doctoral university with moderate research activity. We have roughly 34 or so graduate programs, where professional master's degrees are relatively dominant. Our largest program in size, just by number, is actually in education, but I would say that Pacific has a fairly strong focus on health-related programs, and we're also sort of growing in that direction. We have a physician assistant program, physical therapy, speech-language pathology, audiology, and a number of other programs. What makes us different from many other institutions is that we actually have 3 campuses. I'm currently here in Stockton, but that changes as the week sort of goes along. In Stockton, we have our largest group of students, both undergraduate and graduate. Actually, all of our undergraduate students in Stockton. But in Sacramento, in addition to the McGeorge School of Law, we have a number of graduate programs, and we have about 300 graduate students there as well. And in San Francisco, in addition to the Dugoni School of Dentistry, we have a number of programs, including data science and audiology, music therapy. So we're really a true sort of 3-campus university, which has its own challenges, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. Slide. I wanted to give you a very brief history of the graduate school. The graduate school was first established in 1956, about a year after the pharmacy school was founded. And it's sort of been in existence, mostly focusing on graduate programs on the Stockton campus until about 1999. And in 1999, a decision was made to merge the graduate school with the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. And then it became known as Research and Graduate Studies on Campus. It had a part-time graduate dean who also was responsible for the research side of the house. And so it often seemed that there was not enough time really to pay close attention to the graduate programs. Then around 2013, 2014, Pacific decided to focus on graduate education, and we launched 13 new graduate programs since 2015, which when I first came to campus seemed like a pretty staggering number, and I still think it is. Concurrently with that, we saw a growth in graduate enrollment since 2013 of about 40%. And so this renewed emphasis on graduate programs and graduate students really caused the provost to request a CGS consultation, which took place in August and September of 2016. The three consultants we had were from the University of Louisville, Virginia Tech, and UCLA, so not really schools that are very similar to ours, but nevertheless, we got some very valuable insight and feedback. The consultation, and I'm kind of getting ahead of the process a little bit, but the consultation eventually resulted in the relaunch of the graduate school in July of 2017, which is also when I was hired into this position, but again, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Slide. So the consultation focused on three main areas. One was the organizational and administrative structure for graduate education at Pacific. The second was faculty participation in graduate education. And then the third large area was the area of student services, graduate student services, and professional development for both graduate students, but also graduate faculty at the institution. Slide. So in the following few slides, I'll go over some of the recommendations to give you some context for the things that we've been able to do since the consultation took place. So in the area of organizational and administrative structure at Pacific, there were a total of 8 recommendations. I'm summarizing these here somewhat, but one recommendation was to hire a full-time graduate dean and reestablish the graduate school, so split the graduate school from the research office and bring that back into existence. I think one of the reasons I was chosen for this position was that I had gone through a similar process at my previous institution as the associate dean in the graduate school, where we also went through the divorce, if you will, of the 2 units, and then sort of a build-up of the graduate school as its own unit. And the recommendations in that area were to establish minimum standards, policies, and services for graduate education across all 3 campuses. Until then, policies were very focused on the Stockton campus only, and there was a lack of support of grad students at the Sacramento and San Francisco campuses, and so these were also priorities for me during my first year. Another recommendation was to reorganize graduate-related services, for example, to move graduate admission out of enrollment management and bring it within the graduate school. Slide. Another important recommendation in that area was to improve student services, especially career and writing support for our graduate students, but also health services, not so much here in Stockton, but again in Sacramento and San Francisco, where these services were somewhat underdeveloped. And then one big recommendation was to develop consistent policies for allocating and managing graduate assistantships. Slide. When it came to faculty participation, recommendations included to better integrate the fairly sizable number of non-tenure, tenure-track faculty in the shared governance structure at Pacific. Improve faculty involvement in program development, so we have programs developed organically from within the faculty as opposed to a somewhat top-down approach that we've seen in the past when it came to the proposal and launch of new programs. Strengthen the role and reorganize Graduate Council, which here at Pacific is called the Academic Affairs Committee of Graduate Studies, or AACG. Come to a more active role for faculty in the program review process, review faculty workload, especially of faculty actively involved in the graduate programs, and then provide training for advising, mentoring, professional development. So, slide. And then the third area, student services and professional development, there were a total of 9 recommendations, which included review of who should oversee graduate versus professional programs, which led to a clarification of which programs fall under the review of the graduate school versus the professional schools. And now essentially the first professional programs remain professional schools, or DDS, RMD, and JD. In addition to the JSD, but all other programs are supported and overseen by the graduates. Recommendation was to move to a single application portal and redistribute the application fees to the graduate school, which I tried and failed, but it's work in progress. Review of graduate tuition setting, increase marketing support, improve our website, and then increase graduate assistantship funding through extramural support, so largely for research assistantships, which we don't have very many. Slide. So this slide talks about some of the actions the university took in response to the consultation before I came on board. The university conducted a national search for a graduate dean, which led to my hire. I already mentioned that the graduate admissions team was moved from enrollment management to the graduate school. The provost's office provided some bridge funding for additional staffing. They hired 2 graduate services specialists, which are positions that are sort of a first point of contact for our graduate students. So if somebody has questions about really anything from housing over financial aid to the registrar's office, they can talk to our GSS staff. Project support specialist was hired, who wears a number of different hats here in the graduate school. She's our budget manager, also oversees the graduate assistantship processes, and is my executive assistant. And then Pacific formed 3 committees in preparation for a refresh of the strategic plan. And as far as the graduate sector goes, there is a graduate pre-matriculation and orientation committee, a graduate policies committee, and a graduate student support committee, which ties back into the recommendations that were made to improve what we're doing in terms of graduate education in those areas. Slide. So when I came on board, there were a number of things that had a high priority for me that I knew we had to tackle early on. One was the review of graduate policies, which had to coincide with our graduate catalog review cycle. And so that's something that we launched last fall, and we went through various sections of the graduate catalog which governs the policies, and we structured much of the admissions and academic regulation sections. I reviewed the way graduate assistantships were allocated to different programs, which was somewhat, for the lack of a better word, traditional. So programs who always had graduate assistants would get graduate assistantships, but there was not much in terms of a data-driven allocation that really considered the needs of the programs for graduate assistantships. And we started developing graduate student support services, including writing support and recognition events to really sort of highlight graduate education at Pacific. We launched a 3MT competition, so the 3-minute thesis competition, which we first had in February of this year. And we put on a number of events during Graduate Student Appreciation Week in April. And maybe most importantly, I was able to secure funding for the staffing that is needed, or staffing and infrastructure that is needed to really have a sustainable graduate school at Pacific. And so in my next slide, I'll talk about this for a minute. So Pacific is in the fortunate position that we have a strategic investment fund. This is money that was put aside a few years ago, and it's largely used for two purposes. One, it's used to develop and launch new programs, both undergraduate and graduate. And it's also used for what we call capacity building projects. So those are projects that require funding to enhance administrative services or student services. And so within that framework, I drafted a proposal to the Strategic Investment Fund, which I submitted in November of last year. It went through various faculty governance bodies and was eventually approved. And it now provides funding to support our mission. It includes funding for an associate dean, a graduate admissions director, an additional graduate services specialist for the San Francisco campus. So we now have one GSS staff person on each campus. Provided funding for an international records coordinator to help with international applications. And then it provided funding to units that don't directly report to the graduate school. So we provided funding to the Writing Center to hire 2 graduate writing coordinators, which support graduate students in their writing efforts and serve all 3 campuses. And we also provided funding to Student Life to expand counseling services, mental health services for both the Sacramento and San Francisco campuses. And then with the increased staffing, obviously there's a need for an increased operating budget, which also came from the Strategic Investment Fund. Slide. The next few slides are on implementation strategies. So tying this back to the 3 areas of consultation. In terms of structural improvements, we're going through an almost constant reorganization of the graduate school team, so we're not quite settled yet, but that's, I think, no wonders given that we're only about a year old. We're continuing to review graduate assistantship allocations. That, again, is sort of an iterative process that hopefully will do more evenly and more fairly distributed assistantship allocations within the next couple of years. I already mentioned the writing and mental health counseling support that we were able to fund through the Strategic Investment Fund. And we are going through an ongoing review of graduate policies and the services of graduate students on all 3 locations. Slide. In the area of faculty participation, I've been working very closely with the chair of AACG, so the graduate council chair, to really engage the council in decision-making processes. When I got here, the council was fairly passive and really did not provide a lot of input, and so that's slowly changing, I think. I helped to develop bylaws for the council and also helped to clarify and expand the council charge. We just sort of started discussions about graduate program review. There's not really a systematic program review for graduate programs at Pacific at this point, but I'm hoping that over the next year or so, we'll make some headway in that area as well. Some of the other recommendations I don't have direct control over, so I have no impact on faculty governance because it's very much governed by each individual school. So I'm working with my colleagues, my dean colleagues at the academic units to work toward implementing recommendations in that area. Slide. And then finally, student services and professional development. We have developed a graduate student campus climate survey, which I think will give us important insight in the needs of our students on all 3 campuses. We're integrating graduate student support. We worked with other academic units, including registrar and financial aid, to expand hours for our students in Sacramento and San Francisco, because a lot of those students are working professionals who take classes in the evening. And so if the registrar's office closes at 5, it really doesn't help them a lot. So we were able to convince them to stay open a bit longer for a few days a week. We have transitioned to a single application portal for our graduate program applications. I'm in the middle of presenting a study on graduate tuition and graduate tuition setting to the provost. We're developing a marketing plan for graduate programs, which of course will require additional funding, and we've redesigned the graduate school website to provide better resources and easier access to those resources to our students, faculty, and staff. Some of the outcomes, we're now present on all 3 campuses through our graduate service specialists. In fact, a large portion of our admissions and recruitment team is permanently located in Sacramento. I travel to all 3 locations at least 1 or 2 days a week in Sacramento, and try to go to San Francisco about once or twice a month. We have now a consistency of graduate policies across all campuses, although, as I mentioned, that's a work in progress. We now have dedicated graduate writing support for our students. We have a redesigned website I just mentioned, and we improve graduate student recognition through a number of events that are already mentioned as well. Right. I was asked to give some advice. My advice would be to be realistic and set priorities. There's a million of things that I could be working on, but there's only so much time in the day, so I'm really trying to focus on the most important areas of the consultation of the recommendations that were made. I was an external hire, so when I got here, I didn't know anyone at Pacific, so I think it's very important to spend the first month or 2 to really get to know your colleagues. I met with everybody, we talked, and that has led to a number of really valuable collaborations. Identify potential funding sources. As I said, I was in the fortunate position that there was some internal funding available to build out the graduate school. And then maybe most importantly, tread lightly, learn about the institution. I came from a public institution in Texas that was about twice the size of Pacific, to a private institution in California. So there are a lot of things for me to learn, and some of the things I have to do, for example, when I think about graduate assistantship allocations, don't necessarily make me the most popular person on campus, but but that's part of the job. So I think that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And so our last speaker today is going to be Robert Augustine, who is the Senior Vice President at the Council of Graduate Schools. Take it away, Bob.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go over the typical processes that we use here to set up a strategic consultation, and I want to amplify that the focus or support for strategic consultations is in support of the role of the graduate school and university, and that role is defined in our monograph titled Organization and Administration of Graduate Education, and that the primary purpose of the graduate school is to define and support excellence in graduate education and the research and scholarly activities associated with it. And that's part of the important process that you see with the deans that just presented. Helps you to lead your strategic planning initiatives and helps you to improve in underperforming areas. And as you also heard, it allows you access to new expertise and networks that you might need to be able to advance graduate studies on your campus. A consultation is composed of 3 phases or 3 parts. The first is the assessment profile phase, the next is the site visit phase, and the concluding activities are the report phase. I'll go over these in some detail in just a minute. We provide resources to you to help prepare you for a consultation, including the models and the costs of a consultation, so you know what those are, and you can put those things in order. We can provide you with examples of assessment profiles. For the consultants, we can provide you with examples of recent consultation reports, and we try to guide you to our CGS best practice publications to tie these into the activities that you'll be doing in a consultation. The assessment profile begins with your team on your campus arranging a conference call with me. Your team might include representatives of the graduate school. Sometimes the provost is involved. Sometimes other members of the staff are involved. During the call, we will identify the areas that you want us to focus on, 3 to 4 areas that are really important for you to be able to advance. We put that together into an assessment profile that's sent to you for review. Once you have it approved, then we begin talking about the consultation processes. Those processes include the models that you might want to implement, and I'll go over those in a little bit, the cost of those models, and we talk about a site visit template. What will the site visit look like? Who will the consultants meet with? What will be the focus of each of those meetings as they go through your campus? After we get through the assessment profile and it's approved, the next stage is the site visit stage. This begins with a confirmation of the model you wish to use and the specific dates you'd like to have the consultants on your campus. As the deans pointed out, our interest is in finding deans that have the right expertise for the areas, deans that come from institutions of similar scope and mission or that might be of an aspirational scope and mission. And once we have all of the deans lined up and all the dates lined up, we move forward with establishing the site visit. As the site visit approaches, the on-site practice, as you heard, includes a welcome for the deans when they arrive to campus the evening before. This reception or dinner is extremely important in mapping out what will happen in the coming days, highlighting any concerns that they might need to know about before they start the process, and creating a good camaraderie between the consultants, and the on-site leadership team. Day one is a full day for any model that you use. Consultants usually begin at 8 in the morning with breakfast, and then they have meetings all day throughout the day. As one of the deans pointed out, there might be lunch breaks scheduled with the team. There might be evening dinners scheduled with the team. And then they move into the next day. If this is a 3-day consultation, then day 2 is similar to day 1, and the final day concludes usually with a exit interview with the key members of the team. From that time on, the consultants will be putting together their draft report, and they try to have it to the campus within 60 days of completion of the site visit. The report practices include sending a report here to CPS for us to review. We take a look at it, make sure that it's clear to us. We might go back and forth with the consultants a little bit to make sure that everything is in order, that each one of the areas of focus has been addressed, the recommendations are clear. Once we have a report that's in final format, we send it to the university for an initial review. The institution has a couple of weeks to take a look at it, make any final changes, and then the final report is forwarded to the university. Once the final report is forwarded, then the university can share that report with the constituents there at the university. The concluding processes include reimbursements for travel and fee payment, billing the institution, and then the concluding letters that include recognition of the work of the consultants to their superiors. There are 2 primary models that we use here at CGS for consultations, a 2-consultant 2-day model. This includes the costs to CGS, the cost per consultant, and the travel. The travel costs generally run about $1,000 per consultant. So that model costs about $9,000 and about $11,000 with travel expenses. The 3-day model you see outlined there with the cost of the fees, the consultants, and travel costs. So somewhere around $15,000 to $17,000 for the 3-day model. These are common areas of focus for a consultation. Organization and administration is a very common focus where there's some needed guidance in how they might organize the graduate school research, depending on what the structure of the organization might be. And you can take a look at some of the areas there, and you heard some of the deans who presented focus on some of these particular areas. These are consultations that have taken place recently, and these are areas where if you had any questions, you can certainly consult with these institutions and talk to them about the potential for consultations at their institution and how things are going as they implement the recommendations. Each year I do a consultation forum at the annual meeting. This year that consultation forum is scheduled for 4:45 to 6 p.m. in the council room of the Omni Shoreham Hotel here in Washington, D.C. And if you're interested, please let me know so we can make sure that we have plenty of space for people who might want to attend. And that brings us to the question phase.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, please type them into the questions box, and we will read them out loud for the recording, and hopefully you'll get some answers. Okay, so one question that's come through asks, how far in advance should one start to schedule?
It can take approximately 2 months to try to ensure that we have consultants available for your specific dates. So we need to have the assessment profile approved and ready to go about 2 months before the timeline that you'd like to use for consultants on your campus. Typical times to have an on-site visit in the fall occur around the middle of September until the middle of November. Before that, people are getting ready to launch the term, and after that, the term is ending in the spring, about the 1st of February until about the middle of March. So these are the prime times to schedule. So we have to have that assessment profile in order well in advance of those times.
Okay, another question that's come through asks, what type of data should be gathered prior to the planning process and the actual site visit?
The kinds of reports that are very useful and helpful to the consultants include any kind of annual reports you have on enrollment and degrees in your institution, so they can understand how enrollment and degrees are evolving over the last several years. If you do annual reports on the graduate school or the research enterprise, these are extremely valuable. If the graduate school and research office have a strategic plan, these are very valuable. If there have been other consultations done in other areas of the university where the graduate school and research enterprise have received some attention, these are very valuable to the consultants. Those tend to be the kinds of reports that consultants find valuable in preparing for an institutional snapshot of your university so that they are well versed in what the issues are. Now, in the event you have some specific areas of review, let's say that those areas included, we saw one on the financing of graduate student awards. It might be important for the consultants to have a nice summary of what the current investment portfolio looks like for graduate student awards and how that changes over time so that they have a sense of what the investments are in that particular area. You also heard some questions about the investments used in research costs and things like that. So having a report on the research portfolio might be extremely important to the consultants.
Are there any further questions, either for Bob or for either one of our guest deans today? Okay. So I just we have a couple more slides as we close. One, I just want to thank everybody for participating today in the webinar. The webinar recording, as well as the slides, will be emailed to participants in today's webinar and also posted on the CGS website within 1 week. And please feel free to share these with interested colleagues. I also want to alert our audience that the next CGS webinar will be titled Centralized, Decentralized, or Blended, Choosing Your Best Fit Admissions Model, and will take place on October 3rd from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much and have a great day.